Welcome.
I'm Cavan Scott, one of the story architects of Star Wars The High Republic.
This is Dominic Pace, who plays Gekko the Bounty Hunter from The Mandalorian.
Hi, I'm Claudia Gray. I write Star Wars books.
And you're listening.
And you are listening
to Star Wars Comics in Canon. The Force is strong with this one.
Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 118. So my friends, this week I am tackling the Tales from the Rancor Pit by Cavan Scott. So this episode is going to be in the same vein as the 3 Vader's Castle episodes, which were episodes 76, 103 and 112. Basically, Cavan Scott loves horror, and so he writes anthology horror stories in the Star Wars universe, sometimes referencing other things, or pretty much always referencing other things, but still, for the most part, being canon. I say for the most part because in this story, there's one that ends, and then a certain character says, that's not how I remember it, so it's like, oh, is that really what happened? Who knows? And then in Vader's Castle 1 and 2 are canon, but Vader's Castle 3, which is Ghosts of Vader's Castle, almost all the anthology horror stories in that are like dream sequences, so they're not actually canon. So, I just thought I'd comment on that. But Tales of the Rancor Pit is still canon, but this is published by Dark Horse, whereas the prior Vader's Castle comics were published by IDW. That's because I think Dark Horse now basically just have the licensing that IDW had for the all ages comics. So there are going to be more Dark Horse stories in the canon going forward. I already have a few comics, and obviously Dark Horse did a lot of iconic Legends comics. So Dark Horse have got good stead with the Star Wars community for the most part. Just before I delve into this comic, if you haven't joined me before, in brief, I go through comics in chronological order, I give yourselves plot details as I go through them, and then along the way I also give bonus information on certain species or events or planets or characters that reoccur that have appeared in other pieces of canon content that I find interesting or relevant. So it's a great way to get a better understanding of the canon from the comic perspective, while along the way just getting a better understanding of the canon as a whole. And I will say that I always recommend people pick up these comics, read them physically or digitally, however, but please try and support the creators of this. Although this show serves as a really good way for you to get an understanding of the canon without having to pick up every single comic, I still always encourage people to pick up these comics because they're great. So with that in mind, let's delve into the release and personnel info. So unlike the Vader's Castle series, Tales from the Rancor Pit was released in one full go. So there weren't lots of little issues collecting together and then a trade paperback that came out. It's just one release and it's the whole story, which I do quite enjoy, especially makes this podcast a little bit easier. But this graphic novel was released on November 23rd, 2022 in comic stores and then was released in bookstores January 3rd, 2023. The writer for this is Cavan Scott, and then Nick Brokenshire is the colour artist and artist for the framing story. So for a lot of these anthology stories, you have a framing story, and then there's characters that talk about certain things, and then these characters in the framing story then give you like the anthology stories, as it were. So there's one sort of current story that's kind of the main one, and then you've got the sort of the mini stories in between it. So Nick Brokenshire did the artwork and colour artwork for all of the framing stories, and then as we get into each of the 3 short stories, I will confirm what they're called and then the associated artists with them, but Cavan Scott did write all of this. Now the framing story is set after Empire Strikes Back but Return of the Jedi, so it's set around 3 to 4 years after the Battle of Yavin. So my friends, with that all in mind, let's delve straight in because there is no crawl today, so we're right into the story. So it starts off in Jabba's palace on Tatooine, and there is a being that hangs over the Rancor Pit, which is a Hassarian species. Now Hassarians aren't really in canon or legends that much, and I'd not really seen them before. They're essentially a furry, almost rat-like being, so they're humanoid. It does sort of remind me of the show Arthur. Arthur, it's meant to be Arthur the Aardvark, and there's all these anthropomorphic animal kids that are living their life, even though he looks literally nothing like an Aardvark at all. This character, who's called Vaclav, kind of looks a little bit like Arthur, so it's basically just a very furry human with a rat head. That's kind of how I would describe it. Now, in the canon, they first appeared in Cavan Scott's Starlight story called First Duty. That's one of these short story collections that exists, and I tackled that on my Starlight Stories episode, in episode 113 of this show. And it's noted that the Hassarians have a rivalry with Skembo, but Skembo are not really mentioned anywhere else, so I'm not going to delve into them. But the Hassarian species has actually been mentioned once before in Legends, and they were in a book called The Tyrant's Test. It's the third in the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy, and it's part of the New Republic, so it's set obviously after the original trilogy and stuff, and Han Solo's in it, that sort of thing. I don't really know much about this. In fact, to be honest with you, I'd never even heard of this trilogy, so sorry to my Legends fans. But yeah, Hassarians, barely in Legends and barely in canon, so obviously Cavan Scott can kind of do what he wants with it. But anyway, this Hassarian in particular does have pink fur, so it's this pink-furred being hanging over a Rancor pit, and he's being accused of having loose lips by telling rivals things about Jabba the Hutt. So this Hassarian, Vaclav, is begging for his life, and he decides the best way to impress Jabba is to tell him a story, and this story is set during the Clone Wars. So the story is called Ghosts of the Machine, and artwork and colour artwork are both done by Juan Samu. So the Clone Wars are set between 22 years before the Battle of Yavin and 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, basically between episodes 2 and 3 of Star Wars, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Obviously there's also a series which has 7 seasons and a movie with it as well, so it's quite a flushed out time in Star Wars, but it's another story. So basically, Hassarians joined the Separatists, and on the planet Malenko, there was a battle raging on. There was mentions of cursed lands and rumours of an Andon species who were extinct but were seemingly necromancers, or at least there was the rumour that they were necromancers. So one of the Separatists' generals, who didn't care about any of this hearsay about necromancy or anything like that, he is a Hassarian species, and he had no value or care of any of the droids fighting underneath him. 2 Jedi go to attack, along with an army of clones, and that's where the battle rages. Now, these 2 Jedi are none other than Mace Windu and Depa Billaba. Mace Windu, obviously yourselves should know, because he features quite prominently in the prequel trilogy, and also in Legends, he features prominently in the Shatterpoint book. But I have also delved into his comic miniseries, which is Mace Windu, Jedi of the Republic, on episode 16 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. Now, Depa Billaba is a little bit more complex because Depa in Legend and Canon have completely different stories for most part. Both in Legends and Canon, they are Mace Windu's apprentice or Padawan, and they grow to become like a fully fledged Jedi. But in Legends, she features very heavily in Shatterpoint. She gets captured by someone and she somewhat loses her connection to the Force in some ways. I don't really want to spoil Shatterpoint, but it's a really interesting story about Mace Windu and like the dirty, horrible stuff during the Clone Wars that we don't really get to see much elsewhere. Like in the Clone Wars series, there are obviously horrendous stuff that happens in war crimes, but Shatterpoint really goes deep into that. So if you want to hear a really intense story about Mace Windu and Depa Billaba, check out the Legends book Shatterpoint. But obviously this is a show featuring on the canon. So what is Depa like in canon? Well, you can actually see her in The Phantom Menace, which obviously Phantom Menace is both in canon and Legends. She's at the ceremony right at the very end, and she actually stands behind, I think it's Even Piel, I think his name is, who he's in the Clone Wars. He's in the Citadel arc specifically, but you do actually get to see Depa Billaba in live action, which is quite cool. She is in the Clone Wars, I think a real small amount, like a bit in the background here and there. I can't remember if she has any specific speaking lines in the Clone Wars, but she does appear in the first episode of The Bad Batch. She's there when Order 66 happens, and she protects her Padawan, Caleb Dume. Now, she's also in the Canon comics. So Canon from Star Wars Rebels, Kanan Jarrus, aka one of my all-time favourite characters in anything. He, when he was a Padawan, called himself Caleb Dume, and Depa Billaba was his master. So there's all that sort of stuff kind of wrapped in. Depa is a very important character to me because she trained up Kanan. And then in Legends, she is a very important part of Mace's thinking and how Mace approaches things around the Clone Wars. So important character in both continuities, but I thought I'd give a bit of information there. Now, I gave all that information, and neither of these Jedi ever get mentioned again, but I just thought it was fun to delve into Depa Billaba. Any excuse to be able to talk about Kanan, I will take. But anyway, so the Jedi attack and the general retreats to the catacombs, which is where all the broken droids are just like left and abandoned, basically. He gets Lep 999 to go get him a drink, and then the droid comes back, and then he tells the droid to go and investigate this noise. Now, Lep 999 is an LEP series service droid. Now, we have actually seen them first in the Clone Wars movie. They've also been in the Clone Wars series, and they've also featured in the Book of Boba Fett in live action. You may remember there's a point where Boba Fett kind of goofily chases a little droid around a kitchen. That droid is a LEP droid, a LEP droid. Where in Legends, they are a tiny bit in Legends, but primarily they're in like 1 or 2 stories outside of the Clone Wars, but yeah, they're not really in Legends much, they're in canon a lot more. So his LEP droid goes and investigates what this noise is, and it turns out it's some red-eyed battle droids. B1 battle droids, specifically, they're the ones with the long noses that we saw prominently in The Phantom Menace. So they're like glowing green in some way, it looks like, they've got red eyes, and they seem to be possessed, and they're like going after this general. So he fires his blaster at them, but the bolts go straight through them. They then shoot back and actually hit Lep 999. So the general continues to run away, and they're calling to him, and they're saying like really weird things, and he's getting more and more freaked out. He starts to go down sort of the basement or the catacombs. He just goes further and further down these stairs, trying to escape them, but just more and more droids keep emerging. There's B-1 battle droids, there's spider droids, now the LEP droids are following him as well. There's lots of them. So he eventually gets cornered, and there's just thick mist around him, and so he uses comms to contact Separatist Command. The comm comes back and says that, well, ghosts are impossible, which is the thing that he said right at the start of this comic, which is why he's not bothered about staying in these catacombs and whatnot. He tries to ask for help, and they don't really assist him at all, so he asks, who is it? And they say, well, I'm definitely not a droid who knows about a certain gas that can cause hallucinations and visions and nightmares, and I'm definitely not the kind of droid who'd reprogram another droid so they would see certain things to go along with it. And I'm definitely not trying to show a lesson about sacrificing droids or anything like that. And then the final panel of this short story is what seems to be a medical droid. So they're kind of like a cylindrical sort of droid. They often have like saws on them or sort of several arms. They are in live action a bit, but one of these comes out with a buzzsaw and goes right for this general. He screams, and then it ends. And it's basically saying that the droids all kind of attacked him because he didn't respect them and sacrificed loads of them and stuff. So seemingly he was cut down. So back at present day, Jabba is somewhat hard to read. He kind of just stares at the Hassarian and doesn't really say much, but then says, another. So Vaclav decides to start another. And this one, he says, is set much earlier than the prior story. So this story is called Undead or Alive. The artist is Andy Duggan, and the colour artist is Roman Stevens. It's set around the High Republic era, specifically around Phase 1, so that is around 200 years before The Phantom Menace, but it seems from what I can see online, this happened anywhere between 10 years before The Rising Storm and up to like maybe a few years before. It seems to have taken place before Monster of Temple Peak, which is relevant because the main character in the story is Ty Yorrick, who is a Tholothian, and she is a saber for hire. She left the Jedi Order. I'm not going to delve into why, but if you want to hear about her leaving the Order and just a bit more bio information about her, check out episode 87 of Comics in Canon, because I delve into the IDW Publishing miniseries. Obviously, I also say read The Rising Storm, the High Republic book. It is fantastic, and that's where she was introduced. So it's a story about her. And as I said, this is seemingly around 241 years before the Battle of Yavin, so maybe 10 years before The Rising Storm, but I would at a guess say it's nearer sort of 5 years before it, just because Ty doesn't actually seem that young in it, although she did leave the Order when she was a bit younger. But again, go check out that episode if you want to hear more about Ty. So the story, Ty Yorrick gets a comm from a Cerean called Dro Nal Pru. Now Cereans you will have seen because Ki-Adi-Mundi is in the prequel trilogy and he is a Cerean. They've got the long heads, I've heard people derogatorily call them turnip heads, and the reason for this is because they have binary brains. Apparently they're incredibly intelligent and can think of two different perspectives at the same time of one thing. I would argue that's not the case because everything I see Ki-Adi-Mundi in that's in canon, he just seems to be very like one note. He just seems to completely follow the Jedi Order and doesn't really ever provide any alternative perspective. He's arguably as dogmatic, if not more so, than Mace Windu. So whenever I've seen him in the Clone Wars, I'm like, no, don't really like him much. I know in Legends it's a lot more detailed. Like I know the 99 Star Wars comics were like heavily featured Ki-Adi-Mundi in it for the first, I think it was like 10 issues or something, and it goes all into the depth of like Cerean culture. And in canon we have a little bit of that, but not quite as much. But in canon it's confirmed they've got the binary brains and they have two hearts as well. And I think it's been confirmed that there's not that many Cereans about. Whereas in Legends it goes into a lot more detail, but in brief in Legends it says that because there's such a small amount of Cereans, the Jedi Order have granted Cereans permission to surpass non-attachment, so they can have attachments to people, and basically they can have sex. That's the long and the short of it, whereas Jedi aren't really meant to. So Cereans are allowed to procreate, and also I think in Cerean culture and Legends you can have a male can have like multiple wives just because there's so little of the species. So Ki-Adi-Mundi in Legends has like 2 or 3 wives, I recall. But yeah, that's a little bit of information about Cereans. So Ty knows this Cerean, Dro Nal Pru, because Ty was on her mercenary team. But Ty left because Ty claims that Dro wanted Ty to hurt lots of defenseless people, which she didn't want to do. So Dro offers 4,000 credits to Ty to get this big unknown clawed creature. Ty is kind of unsure, so does what Ty often does when she's unsure, which is throw her runes. So they're basically these square tiles, and they've got suns on one side, moons on the other. If it shows suns, yes. If it shows moon, no. So she throws them, and it shows suns. So she heads to find the beast. She goes to the planet that this beast is apparently residing, and she then meets someone called Gren, or is reacquainted with someone called Gren. Now, Gren is an individual who was part of Dro Nalpru's mercenary team, much like Ty. It seems like Gren also left the team, much like Ty. And Gren is not a Thalothian like Ty. She is actually a Mithril. Now, a Mithril is actually in The Mandalorian. It's the blue chap who is kind of a loser in a way. I think it's the first episode of Mandalorian where he freezes him in carbonite and then he makes a reappearance, I think in season 2. I believe it's when he's working with Grief Karga, which is Carl Weathers' character. But in Mithril, there's not really much about them. They're not in Legends. There's only a little bit about them in canon, and they can live up to a few hundred years. They're blue-skinned, and a younger one is called a fledgling, and there's like one that's in The Rise of Skywalker as kind of a background thing. So Pablo Hidalgo canonized that's how it looks as a fledgling, which is a youngling. So if you want to scour through The Rise of Skywalker for people in the background and see anyone who vaguely looks like the character from The Mandalorian, there you go. It's a fun little evening for you. So anyway, back to Ty and Gren. So Gren offers to work together with Ty. They can split the credits and try and get this monster together. Ty says no, and then Gren shoots her with an electro net and temporarily stuns her. Ty's astromech, Rover, then comes over and saves her from the electro net, but Gren has run off to find this monster. Ty analyzes one of the hairs found in the forest near some claw marks and stuff, and then looks immediately panicked and runs after Gren. It turns out that this big monster is something called a Shunji, Xunji. They're very big, they have like big rippling muscles, they almost like the build of a gorilla, but kind of bigger than that. Big underbite with big teeth, kind of like a demon gorilla thing, and they seem to be feral. As Ty catches up with Gren, Gren gets attacked by the Shunji and gets scratched. Ty notes that something very bad is about to happen, and then Gren transforms into a Shunji as well. She grows very, very tall, her muscles rip out, she becomes feral. It's kind of like an American Werewolf in London thing, but it only happens in like one panel, so you don't actually get to see loads of horrendous, gruesome details. But now there are 2 of them. Ty's droid, KL, then comes to her and notes that they were looking through some of the records and it seems that Dro purchased the beast. And so it seems like Dro actually tried to kill both Ty and Gren using this as some sort of ploy. So you see a panel where Ty attacks these beasts and then it cuts to Dro's ship. Dro is expecting news on what's happened to Ty and Gren, but hears nothing. Although there is some sort of giant metal crate that was left just outside the laser barrier. So they bring it on the ship and Ty then communicates with Dro. So she comes in and asks for credits. Dro then says, well, is there any proof that the Shunji is actually dead? And Ty says, well, you need to check the delivery. The box itself now is starting to rattle and shake and make a lot of noise, and Dro is looking pretty worried about it all. Ty says that she'll throw her runes to see what to do, throws the runes, a moon comes up, and then the crate opens up and the beasts escape and attack. So that's the end of that short story, but the final sort of little speech bubbles on that is Jabba saying, that's not how I remember it. Because Jabba, I think, at the time of death in Return of the Jedi is like 600 odd years old. So he's been around since the High Republic and before that. There's only a very small handful of characters that are that old. And it's like Jabba, Yoda and Maz Kanata. But Maz is almost double the age of Jabba. And obviously Yoda is like 900. But it'd be interesting to know what actually happened then. I don't know if Cavan's got plans to actually delve into that, or if it's just kind of one of those fun things where it's like, oh, who knows what actually really happened. I assume the latter, because I know Cavan Scott likes horror films quite a lot. But in any case, Vaclav then says he's got another story about someone who's a little bit closer and looks in the corner and sees Han Solo frozen in carbonite. So this final short story is called In the Lair of the Dragon Slug. The artist is Rafael Pérez and the colour artist is DJ Chavis. Now this is set around 3 ABY, so it's just before The Empire Strikes Back because it is set on Hoth when they're still sorting out their base of operations, but they keep running into more and more problems. And there's quite a few stories actually about the amount of issues they ran into in Hoth. I know in the Star Wars 2020 run, there is also an issue or two about Leia reminiscing about Han. I think it's only one issue. But yeah, Hoth was a huge amount of problems for everyone. We only saw in Empire Strikes Back like right at the sort of tail end of them going there, but it was a big issue. So on the Hoth base, Leia is giving commands to all kinds of different people while Han and Chewie are fixing the Millennium Falcon, and they're making quite a bit of noise. Leia comes over and asks them to be quiet after Chewie seems to drop some sort of spanner because Echo Base is already a disaster. They then hear some sort of strange noise coming from the Wampa caves, and it sounds like that the Wampas are scared. Now obviously Wampas are in Empire Strikes Back is basically the big Yeti thing that attacks Luke. I'm fairly certain that in the original edition you don't really get to see the Wampa much, or if not at all, whereas in the special edition of Empire Strikes Back you get to see the Wampa, and I think the Wampa's great, so I'm happy for that addition to be in there. but they're not really in much else. They're in the certain point of view Empire Strikes Back novel, which is Empire Strikes Back, told from the perspective of supporting characters, and there is actually one story from the perspective of the Wampa, which is quite interesting. But in the rest of Star Wars universe in canon, you only really see Wampas. I mean, they're mentioned in passing, primarily after Empire Strikes Back, but you see their pelts around, you see their heads as trophies on a few places like Dok-Ondar's Den of Antiquities. I believe that has like a Wampa head on the wall, things like that. I think there's like some Trandoshans that have one as well, and it is also noted that Gracchus the Hutt seemingly has a Wampa too. They're approximately 3 meters tall, around 150 kilograms, and they are only found in Hoth, and they're in quite a lot of Legends content as well, so you can check that out if you want. There's way more bio information about them, about their size, and all kinds of other stuff about them in Legends. So, Leia, Han, Chewie, and 3PO all head into the caves from where this noise is coming from. Leia says, maybe we could get Luke, and then Han just like, no, we don't need Luke, and heads straight in, while Chewie is a little bit freaked out by the situation. They come across some Wampa pups, who are all scared, and then they all kind of charge through this group of people, but Han gets knocked over, and the rest of them seem to avoid them. They then hear the adult, and then see it is fighting a dragon slug. Now, a dragon slug is meters and meters long. In Legends, it's like 20 meters long, but it's not confirmed in canon. And they're a fire-breathing beast. They're reptilian, sort of. I mean, a dragon slug makes you think of a big slug, but it's more like a snake with a dragon head. It's kind of like maybe Dragonair from Pokemon. Lots of different references, but this is the only canon appearance of dragon slugs. Now, dragon slugs have appeared in Legends, but only a small amount. They appeared in the Legends Marvel comic strips, which were like really early on. It's like some of the first content you could get outside of the movies. Then they're also in 2 one-shot stories, and then they're also in like an episode 1 Adventures playbook. So they're in Legends a bit, but not that much. So anyway, you see the dragon slug and this Wampa both fighting each other, and Leia and Chewie have some sort of plan trying to help the Wampa pups, and they tell Han that he must stay and protect the Wampa. Then another dragon slug approaches, and then Han is trying to like dodge out the way of these things attacking while trying to figure out how on earth he can actually help the Wampa at all, and then he hears some like seemingly explosions or big loud noises going off in the distance. They get louder and louder and louder, and eventually it scares the slugs off. As soon as the slugs have gone, the Wampa then goes to its pups, and then Leia and Chewie emerge, and they've got the Millennium Falcon thrusters that have been somewhat emptied, which is the thing that Han and Chewie were working on, and they were like moving them and seemingly banging them, and that's what made these big noises that Han notes sounded a bit like an even bigger monster. The Wampas seem to be happy and basically ignore Leia, Chewie and the gang, and the slugs are gone. So all is well. So Leia, Han, Chewie and 3PO exit the Wampa caves thinking all is well, and the last thing you see is a giant spider in the background. So that's the end of the final short story in this collection, so we've got a few more panels to go before we're the end of this release. So Jabba notes to Vaclav that he enjoyed that story actually, and Vaclav says that he wants to be Jabba's personal palace storyteller. He can tell him stories, keep him entertained, and then also tell stories about Jabba to others. He even mentions the Troshti swarm that Jabba went up against. Now a Troshti, or Trushti, Trooshti, I'd never really heard of before, so I looked a little bit further into it, and it seems like they've only appeared in one piece of content ever before. It's a Legends one-shot comic called Episode 1 Queen Amidala, so obviously it's like information about Padme. The Trushtis are basically furry insects. They're kind of like a furry wasp, but with like a long tail. They're quite weird, but swarms of them can be dangerous, so I just thought that was a fun little tidbit there. So Jabba responds to Vaclav, and he says, yeah, you've given me some ideas. And Vaclav is like, some ideas? And Jabba says, but I make my own entertainment. And so drops Vaclav into the Rancor Pit, although there are no Rancors in this Rancor Pit, but there is a dragon slug, a medical droid, a Wampa, and a Sunji. And that is where the comic ends. So my friends, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun to do. I really enjoyed reading through that, and I think I do prefer it being in one sort of collection. Obviously, I probably would generally prefer trade paperbacks, but because they come out so much later than anything else, it's like I want to try and get comics as soon as they come out. And also value-wise, trade paperbacks are generally cheaper, but if you get a good comic and it's a single issue and you take care of it, has some resale value, I would imagine. I mean, the Canon's not even 10 years old, so yeah, I really like this hardback collection, and it's a lot better because one of the Vader's Castle trade paperback collections I got literally was falling apart as I read it. It's just, I've got it in like a box, but it's like, if you open it, I think 2/3 of the pages just fall straight out, which isn't ideal, not made very well, and I can safely say that this one, the Dark Horse one, is much better made than the IDW publishing one, and it's a bit bigger as well. The IDW one was really small. Also, friends, if you haven't listened to my interview with Cavan Scott, make sure you go check that out. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on the podcast feed of Genuine Chit-Chat. Just type in Cavan Scott Genuine Chit-Chat into any podcast player or YouTube and you can find it. So what have we got coming up? Well, I promised that I would be doing the next batch of Vader comics just after Crimson Reign but before Hidden Empire. Once I've done that, I will probably do Star Wars Revelations because that seems to somewhat tie in with Hidden Empire. It's kind of unclear how, but it's basic. I'll delve into that when we get there. But I'm going to do Vader first, then I'll do Revelations, and then I will probably do Hidden Empire #1 as its own thing. It's kind of hard at the moment because with War of the Bounty Hunters, it was really easy to see which issues connected with what. So it was very easy to see, Star Wars number this connected with Darth Vader number this, which connected with War of the Bounty Hunters #2. And so it's quite easy. And then once you've got that through line, then you know that the next issue of each of them is going to be with War of the Bounty Hunters 3 and 4 and 5, etc. But in Crimson Reign, it was kind of like that as well. There's only a couple of issues in between, but you could do it, you could figure it out. But with Hidden Empire, it's a bit different. They don't seem to have the banners at the top of the issues, and one of the Afra issues that I read, that I tackled in the Afra episode last week, said this is set before Hidden Empire #1. But then the next issue, which seems to take place literally at the same time, doesn't say before, after, or during Hidden Empire. And also I looked in the back of Hidden Empire, because I've got Hidden Empire 1 and 2, I think 3 is on its way, I can't remember. But you look in the back and it says also look out for, this issue, and there's like 8 issues of stuff that's kind of coming out in the same month. And it's a little bit confusing. I'm just like, is that saying that that's correct? Because what I don't want to do is basically do, these are all the ones that connect with Hidden Empire 1, and then Hidden Empire 5 comes out, and then explains that actually the order was slightly more skewed. I'm hoping it's going to become clearer before I delve into Hidden Empire, so I am somewhat gerrymandering to try and not go into that, just in case I kind of mess up the order slightly, but we'll see when we get there. But I've got a few weeks before that. Obviously, as well as Hidden Empire 1, either it will be an own little one-shot issue, or it'll be Hidden Empire 1 and then the related Dr. Aphra, Vader, Bounty Hunters and Star Wars issues. We'll figure that out when we get there, because obviously I do want to somewhat keep to the structure that I did with Crimson Reign and War of the Bounty Hunters, but we'll see. So Vader, Revelations, Hidden Empire, and then there's going to be the review for A High Republic Quest for the Hidden City. There's going to be the Dark Horse Hyperspace Stories, and there's going to be the Clone Wars Battle Tales as well by IDW Publishing. And then on the horizon, there's going to be the Han Solo and Chewie mini-series, 10-issue series that's coming to an end. There's the Yoda mini-series. There's a High Republic one-shot coming out. There's a few bits and pieces, and there was also Darth Vader Black, White, and Red, which has just been announced, which I think is kind of like Vader's greatest hits. So I'll probably tackle that as well, but that's not going to come out till April or May. There's going to be a one-shot of Ewoks that's just been announced, which I think is Alyssa Wong is doing that. And then there's also the Sana Staros miniseries that's coming out by Justina Ireland. So still plenty more comics coming out. Lots of stuff for me to dig my teeth into. Not literally, because eating comics I'm sure will taste terribly, but got some fun stuff planned. I've got things planned amidst book reviews and all kinds of other jazz. That's where we're at. What else am I up to? Well, check the show notes. As always, there's going to be, in the next couple of weeks, going to be appearing on someone's Star Wars show. I'll confirm who they are and that sort of jazz once it's actually been recorded. I'm sure I'll talk to Ben of Star Wars Timeline at some point soon as well. There's no specific Bad Batch coverage, just because it's like, I can't remember how many episodes. It's either like 10 or 16 or something, and it's like I can't warrant doing a discussion episode every week, and people in Comics in Motion, other people I know, there's just not really enough. It's too much effort, really. So Bad Batch, I'm not doing a weekly thing, but Mandalorian's just been announced on March 1st. The trailer for that has dropped, so I imagine I'll be doing a weekly discussion show on the feed of Comics in Motion and on my YouTube channel, as I have been doing for Book of Boba Fett and other stuff as well, so keep your eyes out for that. In addition to that, subscribe to my YouTube channel, where there's every episode of Star Wars comics in canon. They're in playlists and stuff, as well as all my episodes of Genuine Chit-Chat, many of which have got video versions of them as well, and they're in playlists too, and it helps out the show. In addition to that, you can support me by following me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. And you can review this podcast either on the feed of Comics in Motion, if you're listening there. You can review that, obviously Spotify, Good Pods, and Apple Podcasts. But you may be listening on your own special Star Wars comics in canon feed, because I did launch that about a month ago now. I'm only, as of recording this, on episode 32 or 33, I think it is, but I'm trying to release an episode every day. I don't always manage to, because things get in the way and it's not as quick as one would expect it to be. But I am slowly releasing episodes over there. So yeah, if you want to kind of start from Star Wars Comics in Canon from the start and you don't have to wade through the hundreds of episodes in the Comics in Motion feed, then go check out the actual podcast feed of Star Wars Comics in Canon. You should just be able to type it into where you're listening to this and you'll be able to find it. Follow it, subscribe, do all that lovely stuff, and leave reviews for it because no one's reviewed the show before because I barely talk about it and I haven't really announced it on social media or anything yet. So if anyone could go listen to the show, rate it on Spotify and Good Pods and all that other amazing things, it would really, really help me out. Aside from that, my friends, the only other thing left to say is if you want to support the show even more than I've already mentioned, please consider supporting me on Patreon, patreon.com/genuine Chit-Chat. For as little as £1 a month, you get access to hours and hours of additional audio content. There's afterthoughts I release at least once a week. I do Legends book reviews on there. I did Shatterpoint, which I mentioned earlier on in this episode. I've done the Darth Bane trilogy. I've done the Darth Plagueis book. I have recently recorded my review of Rogue Squadron, the first in the X-Wing series by Michael Stackpole. I've also listened to Revan, the book. I'm nearing the end of the Darth Maul Shadowhunter book, which is narrated by Sam Witwer, who obviously voiced Maul in Clone Wars and Rebels. So lots of cool stuff on the horizon for the Patreon. But yeah, there's an episode on there every week, often two. So if you want to get into that, you want to support the show, get loads of bonus content, some Star Wars, some not, please consider checking that out. But that's enough from me, my friends. Thank you for listening. As always, I appreciate each and every one of you listening, especially all the way up to the end where I just plug random stuff and kind of half ramble and beg you to review things for me. So I will speak to yourselves next week, likely with the Vader comics. And as always, may the Force be with you. The intro for Star Wars Comics in Canon is arranged by myself, Mike Burton, and the backing music was made by Eric Matias of soundimage.org.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars Comics in Canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.